Hello, everyone. Welcome back to This Is Why We Stand on Westchester Talk Radio. I'm your host, Joe Archino, and we are broadcasting live from Scarsdale Ford. We are produced by Shark Creative and made possible by Entergy Indian Point Energy Center, MSM Designs, Game Sportswear, King's Capital Construction, and Shark Creative. And of course, now, we were just talking about this off the air, and it's pretty cool because Tom Giorgi has certainly become our guest of honor. Tom, I think you've been on this program more than any other person, and each time I feel like we learn a little bit more, and I just am thrilled every time we get to have you on. So, Tom, as always, it's so good to have you back with us.
And once again, thank you for having me as we broadcast today in the middle of this
wind inferno?
Small tornado that we're dealing with out here on Central Avenue.
You know, it's funny, Tom. I thought when we came out today, I said it's a beautiful day. You know, to be outside, it can't be any better.
No humidity.
No humidity.
Nice cool breeze.
But the wind doesn't want to make things easy today.
No, the breeze is kicking up into like gust-like dimensions here.
We're lucky we got Matt and Jim, who are our crew today, who are just working and hustling all over the place to battle the wind. But Tom, you were with us at Playland, so you saw that day too. When the wind is blowing, sometimes you just can't beat Mother Nature.
That's right. And it's not raining, so it's all good.
That's it. We make the best out of it. We adapt and overcome. That's one thing we've learned from Tom, that certainly is you adapt to the situation, you overcome what's in front of you.
That's right. You got to do it.
Tom, we holy cow, that was a gust. But Tom, we were planning, and we still are going to do a special show just to do it right about your battle, so we can really take our time and delve into the details of it. But we did pass in July the 53rd anniversary of the battle you were involved on July 3rd, 1966. People have really learned more by piece, and again, like I've said, we're going to get into it even more. But I just want to know, for you, what do you think about? How do you wake up on that day of the anniversary? Is it almost like it's a surreal day? Is it something where you feel, what are your emotions on that day?
Well, naturally, my thoughts are always on July 3rd. They never go away. There's a saying. Matter of fact, I have a bracelet that I'm wearing today. It says, not everyone who lost their life in Vietnam died there, and not everyone who came home from Vietnam ever left there. And that describes me. I mean, I am still in the Ia Drang Valley, and I don't know if I'm ever going to get out. But my thoughts are always with that day, and always with the events leading up to it, and during it, and naturally, as we lead up to the 3rd of July. I know it's coming, and usually post a little something on Facebook, just to honor those that died that day and were wounded and served, etc., etc. So I wake up that morning, knowing that I'm going to get through this day somehow. I've gotten through 52, leading up to the 53rd one. It's going to be emotional. There's going to be times I want to sit down and be by myself and just think of what happened. Because I look at my watch, and even though it's a dateline difference, I know what happened at
where you were that day. All those years ago.
at 1 o'clock in the afternoon after we made contact at just before noon, and where I was at 5 o'clock, so I just kind of like relive it, because I remember it so vividly. It's like etched in my memory. I remember so many things. It's crazy, like 53 years ago, and I remember it in such detail. I could remember guys that were dying. I could hear their voices, crying out for their mothers as they were dying, and the screams of my comrades as they were wounded. And, that never leaves me, so naturally on July 3rd, I think of that, it saddens me. I'm happy that I was one of the survivors of that horrific battle, but it's just something that I deal with, on a year-to-year basis on July 3rd, and somehow I managed to get through it with the help of my family. My dear wife always gets me a little something patriotic. A little flag, something for the house that has to do with patriotism, because she knows what a patriot I am ever since I've served in the military. So, the family helps me get through it. My sons know what it's all about, although we didn't talk in great depth about it over the years. Little by little, they've learned a little each year. My sons usually post a little something on Facebook about it. My youngest son says today is all about my dad, and he gives a brief description of what I went through that day.
That's beautiful.
And then he says, you people want to know why I'm a tough SOB. He says this is the reason, because of my father and what he went through, on July 3rd. That was, transferred to me. And that's why I am what I am today, because of what he was 53 years ago on July 3rd.
I want to ask you too, Tom, and I think one of the reasons I want to ask the question is because you think of all the brave, incredible heroes and people who've served this country and have fought battles from the Civil War to World War II to the Vietnam War. Everyone, I'm sure, who survived those battles, like you, carries that weight of that day, and they live through it again every day. And I want to ask you, because I've talked to people who've fought in the Battle of the Bulge. I've talked to a Pearl Harbor survivor, and for so many guys, I truly appreciate when you're willing and open and come and talk, because I know it can't be easy to do that. And some guys I've talked to are never able to recount the experience, and you totally understand it. But did it take you a long time to kind of open up and be able to talk about it? And again, we really do appreciate your openness and willingness to come and talk, because it's not an easy thing to relive.
I recognized when I got back from Vietnam, and I was in St. Albans Naval Hospital, and, my family visited me, a day after I returned. And, I had cousins coming up to me, just saying, like, what the F happened, man? What happened? As they looked at me laying in bed there with tubes running in and out of my body. And to be honest with you, that was the healthiest I looked when I first got back, because I was black from the waist up from the the dark tan that I had, and I still had 145 to 150 pounds of lean muscle, zero fat and lean muscle on me. So I still looked pretty good, but yet they looked at me in bed and they just said, well, what happened? And and I would start to tell them the story, and I would start to hyperventilate, and my mother would be standing at the foot of the bed looking at me. She would see me starting to huff and puff, and and start to get out of breath, explaining what happened, because they asked me and I was trying to tell them, and she said, don't talk about it, look at what it's doing here. And I just said, Ma, I gotta talk about this. I said, you have no idea what I saw in the time I was in country, not to mention what I saw on July, the day I got wounded. I cannot keep it bottled up inside of me. If I do, I'm going to crack. I said, and you're going to have a mental case son on your hands. I said, I've got to get this out. I've got to vent it. I've got to share it. I've got to talk about it. I've got to process it. I've got to deal with it. So from day one, I recognized that this was not something I could and a lot of guys make that mistake, and it's not that they're not strong enough, they just choose not to do it. But a lot of them have very, very serious emotional problems because they never sought help, they didn't go to PTS support groups, they didn't talk to people, and that's the big thing. And I encourage anybody coming back from, I don't know if I can say, when you're in what we used to refer to as the shit, that means you were in combat. So anybody that's coming back from this shit in Afghanistan, Iraq, and anywhere in the Middle East, I say, listen, you're not going to handle this on your own. So go get professional help. Talk to people about this. Get it out in the open, and just learn how to live with it. and talk to people about it that have the knowledge on how to help you. Because if you don't, it's gonna hurt you as you go on in your life. Don't make that mistake. I know I for a long time never knew what it was. The term PTSD, came up in 1970, 72, I think, in the early 70s. And ever since then, there were times when, there were people I literally wanted to kill them. That's how angry I got. And it took a while to figure out that the problems that I were having were related to PTSD. And that's when I said, you got to do some things. And that's when I changed professions. I got out of one profession that was giving me a lot of mental issues and problems, and I became a paramedic, and loved that, and that helped me a lot. And I also got support group help. I started going to the VA. I saw a psychiatrist every couple of months, still do, and that's how I dealt with that whole emotional thing, and processing what you see in combat. And it's not easy, but you got to do it. You can't handle it alone. Don't make that mistake, and don't try to do it. We all try to be tough and strong because we're combatants, and we were in the shit. But you really got to get help and deal with it on a professional basis, and deal with it smartly. So that's how I do it, and I hope everybody else that's been there does it that same way too, because you're going to benefit from it.
And so, I'm really glad that you were able to come on and talk about something like this today, because I know certainly we've had a lot of people who've served in the current wars, and it's still not easy. I think for some guys, they don't know how to handle it, but you've lived it, you've got a lot of experience when it comes to that. And I think whenever they're able to listen to a vet like yourself, it really does help tremendously. So I know that those words are going to carry a lot of weight. And I kind of think that segues into something you and I wanted to talk about today. And I want to go back to one of the last interviews we did on one of the last shows. We had Randy Jurgensen on, who is an actor and an NYPD detective, Korean War vet, and he was just absolutely enamored with meeting you and hearing your story. And he was so touched by it that he wrote a little blurb in the paper about the apology this country owes to its Vietnam War veterans for the way they were treated when they came back home from that war. And that was a veteran who had served this country in another war which didn't get a lot of respect and recognition. The Korean War is called the Forgotten War. People almost act like, between World War II and the Vietnam War, nothing happened. But that was a very, very important conflict. And I think certainly for him to have that level of respect shows you how important it is. It's an issue that you've talked about a little bit before, but it's something that has always just driven me crazy. It's hard for me to understand how people could be so disrespectful. But I mean, Tom, you've lived through it. I'm sure you've got buddies who've lived through the same thing. When you look back today, how does it still make you feel?
Well, like I've said many times, the Korean War and the Vietnam War. If you didn't have somebody that was that you knew as a family member or a dear friend that was involved in those wars, people ignored them. They wanted them to go away. I was young when Korea happened, and I had a cousin that was an MP who was in the 38th parallel, and we were all worried about him, and so the Korean War affected me and affected my family because we had somebody involved in it. But if you didn't, I remember it was certainly after World War II. I was a young boy. The country was getting over World War II, and then Korea came and said, oh, another war. Oh my God, let's get this over with. And then Vietnam comes along, years later, and it's the same response. Like, what are we doing there? We got no business there. Forgetting about the people that are there. I didn't want to be in Vietnam. You think I wanted to leave the lifestyle I was leading? I was 21 years old. I was living at home. I just graduated school. I had a good job. I was playing in a rock and roll band. I was making very good money for somebody, in that age group. Driving a Corvette, a closet full of clothes, dating girls, just leading the life. I did not want to go crawl around in the jungle, and go 28 days without taking a bath. Believe me, I didn't want to do that, but the options that were available to me, just weren't appealing. I wasn't going to go to Canada. I wasn't going to the draft board and say that I was gay, which you couldn't get in the military back then. So I just said, I'm going to suck it up and get through, give my 2 years to the country, which I know is my obligation, and hopefully get through it. But then you come back, and the people that protested to get you back home, that you get back home and they turn your back on you. And it's still that way today. As much as people have tried to apologize to the Vietnam vet, the people from my generation that treated us so poorly when we came back from Vietnam still ignore me. And I have my Silver Star hat on every day, or a T-shirt that says I'm a vet. I'll give you a small example. When I travel, I wear a T-shirt that says, "If you love your freedom, thank a vet." Now, my wife and I, when we travel, we've got bum knees. We've had knee replacements. We travel as disabled people. They usually sit us at the front of the tourist section. So we get on the plane first, and I'm sitting in my seat, and people are, how people get backed up as they're waiting to get, and I know people are standing there, and they're looking dead at my shirt. They're reading it. They're looking right at it, saying, "If you love your freedom, thank a vet." You think anybody reaches down and says, "Thank you for your service. Thank you. I appreciate my freedom. I appreciate it." No, they don't. They just wait until the line moves, and they walk right past me like I'm invisible. And that hurts. I don't need a lot of accolades, but it's nice when people recognize what you've done and are appreciative of what you've done. And I just got thanked for my service the other night, and the kid must look like he was like 15 years old. And those are the ones that thank me. The younger, the 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, people in your age group, and in between. But when you get up to my generation, they still do not have the common courtesy and decency to say to me, "Thank you for your service." Still getting ignored by the people of my generation. And I don't know if that's ever going to change. They hated the war then, and they blamed the war on the warrior. And that's something you don't do. You don't blame the war on the warrior. We just followed orders and did what was expected of us and what was required of us. If we didn't, you get court-martialed, and
that just for people who are wondering, the little tent thing just almost flew to the moon, interrupting Tom's fantastic story. So
we're in the middle of a little
tornado,
a little combat of our own right now with this tornado, but. It's sad that it has to be that way, and I wish people would just open up their hearts and open up their minds and just think about it. Don't blame the war on me. You got an issue with a war, go scream at your politician, man, because they're the ones that make the decisions on this, in this country, on whether we do what we're going to, what we do in another country, whether it's a war or a police action or whatever you want to call it. So, but don't blame it on me, because I did what I had to do. If I didn't, I was going to wind up in a stockade, and believe me, I didn't want that to happen. So, don't blame me for the war, and don't blame anybody else for the war. You don't like what's going on over in the Middle East, then go find your senator, your representative. Write them a letter, email them, bombard them with complaints, but don't blame the people in uniform when they come back. They did, like I said, what they had to do, and they did what they had to do to get back, to America, back to the world, so to speak. So,
Tom, I always say, I've said it before, and I always truly believe this. It doesn't, people always call World War II the best generation. Those guys certainly were, but I believe every generation who answers their country's call during a time of war. Like you said, you don't make the war. Politicians have always decided when it was the time to go to war. It's been up to the nation's warriors to fight that war, such as yourself. So from the Revolution to the Civil War to the Korean War, World War I, World War II, the Vietnam War, every generation of young men who went to war there was the best of their generation. You are a part of the best of that generation. It wasn't the people in the streets who were celebrating when the war ended in 1975, when the gates in South Vietnam were overrun. It was people like you who did the best they could to give South Vietnam its survival. I mean, I think you know how much we appreciate everything you have done for us and always coming on and sharing our stories, Tom. But I hope it's something people will learn from, and it's something we'll continue to be corrected.
Like I said on a previous show, you let an army march off to war, you got to let them march home again, and that's what we need to do with everybody that serves this country, on foreign soil.
It's 100%. Tom, you'll be back with us again. You always are our guest of honor. It was also National Purple Heart Day this week. You are, of course, a recipient of the Purple Hearts. We want to give you a big thank you and a shout out and an acknowledgement for that as well. Tom, it is always a blast to have you on, and looking forward to doing it again soon.
Always great to be here. Love it. Thank you so much.